There have been many video essays on this Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life. That's mainly because the film actually holds up really well and then some. It contains a timeless message. I mean, hey, there's a reason why it's been parodied many a times. In fact, I've got fond memories of watching a Basil Brush parody where Basil Brush can't say because he was never born. And the stand-in for Clarence the Angel was a Santa Claus figure. Did anybody else remember that? I think Double A would remember that. Good old memories, yeah. But anyway, I've noticed that people have been fixating on video essays on It's a Wonderful Life, and it's mainly because it really does contain a timeless message in regards to what's really valuable in life, and as well as tackling the human condition. People these days might say, oh, well, those movies are outdated. No, these kind of movies speak well into the human condition, and people who say otherwise are probably scared of accountability or something. What is It's a Wonderful Life? It is a movie about a man by the name of George, and he is at the end of his ropes. But fortunately, God and his divine agents are on the case. He brings in an angel named Clarence to help George out. But before he can do that, he shows Clarence, and in turn the audience as well, all the key major events in George's life that led him up to this point. God shows Clarence the moment that George saved his brother from drowning in the ice, which caused him to have an ear infection on his left ear in the process. He shows him how he met his wife, how he moved to a new house, how despite every intention of leaving the town for big plans, big adventures, and all kinds of stuff like his friends are, he ends up staying behind the town to help out the people with economic crises and to help the town from the very sinister character, Mr. Potter. And the reason why he's at the end of his ropes is due to a major mistake on behalf of his uncle at the bank. Mr. Potter now has an unfair advantage over George on an economic basis, to such an extent that George is in a suicidal crisis. He's ungrateful for what's already around him, and now he's ready to take it all. And this is where Clarence enters the scene. He encourages George's sense of selflessness by jumping into the river, instead encouraging George to rescue him out. And then once that's done, he openly admits that he's an angel. George kind of scoffs that off and says, I wish I was never born. To which Clarence the angel says, ooh, good idea. All right, wish granted. You've never been born. And so, George sees a horrible alternative reality of what life would have been like if he was never born. If he was never born, he would never have been able to save his brother. So not only did his brother die, but he said and proudly proclaims that his brother's a war hero who managed to shoot down some enemies before they could kill many, many others. But if his brother wasn't alive, he wouldn't have been able to do that heroic act, and thus all those other people also perished. And if George wasn't born, then Mr. Potter would have succeeded exponentially and then some to create a sinner's paradise, and his would-be wife would have been in a terrible position. Clarence emphasizes it's amazing just how much one life can impact so many others. It's amazing just how one life can impact so many others. Then George sees this horrible reality to such an extent that he's shouting, begging, pleading Clarence the angel to take him back. He wants to live again. He wants to be born. And so he's brought back to reality. And even though he's in a terrible situation, suddenly he's just bursting with joy over all these things that he'd taken for granted. And in one of the most satisfying payoffs in all of cinema history, all the people that he's shown kindness and gratitude towards, despite his selfish intentions to leave the town, all these people are so thankful to George and his overall selflessness, conquering his selfishness, that they help him with his economic crisis, and they all live happily ever after. It's one of the most satisfying endings I've ever come across. Now, most of you have already seen this movie, but I wanted to bring up this movie not just to review it as an excellent movie, but also as a word of encouragement around this time of the year, because you've been through a lot, haven't you? I can tell. Sometimes life can beat you to a pulp, like as Rocky Balboa said, "I don't care how big and strong you are. If you beat you, life will beat you down if you let it." You know, that kind of thing. In the words of Rocky Balboa, "This life ain't no sunshine and rainbows," to paraphrase. I understand that life can have its rough edges, rough times. Many a times, we're going to learn what was right there all along the hard way. Now, in times like this, you might wish I was never here. But at the same time, everybody has contributed to someone's life in a profound manner, in some way. If you weren't here, then who would have been there to watch over some of your loved ones? Or perhaps you're in a more comparatively helpless state, and perhaps you're there to bring some love into other people's lives. Everybody contributes to something, so don't neglect your own purpose. Everybody's lives are meaningful. It could very well be that you're striving and striving and striving to achieve some kind of goal, but you're never giving yourself the time to just stop and look around and be grateful for what you already have. Being grateful for what's sufficient for the day. Now that I think about it, I'm thinking about the Pixar movie Soul, which had a similar premise. Obviously not a beat-for-beat retelling of It's a Wonderful Life, obviously, but still addresses one of the same core problems of the human condition, especially in the West. It's that human ambition to have more, but more is never enough. You have to be grateful, and you need to be in the present. And I've noticed one person one time compared this movie to Citizen Kane, and those two movies came together at around about the same time to revolutionize filmmaking. And it's interesting to see the polar opposites of where the main characters end up. In Citizen Kane, the titular character manages to gain everything, but loses his soul in the process. Gains everything only to feel empty inside and pretty much die yearning for more simple times. George, in It's a Wonderful Life, wants more, but then his character arc ends up being grateful for what he has, what he already has, for the successes he's already achieved, for the family members he's already got, for the friends that he's formed, and the joy that comes from community and love and peace and hope. Speaking of George, there's another really profound element in this movie. You see, this movie wasn't initially a success, and that's because this film came up straight after the period of World War II, so people weren't really in the mood for an upbeat kind of Christmas movie, given the sheer amount of despair that people were going through. Now, the actor portraying George, Frank Sinatra, himself had been through terrible warfare. So when it was time to film the scene of George praying to God for help, his portrayal of the character, his tears, his desperation, that was real. That was genuine.
That scene, I remember when I first read the first draft of the script, and that scene, the little prayer, affected me. And when I read it first, when I did it in the movie, it did, and it did the same to me right now. And this is a theory that I've always had, that creating moments in movies. This, I think, is the important thing. Nobody knows exactly how it happens. But what you should do is to prepare yourself as best you can to make these moments happen.
Moments like that you rarely get these days in cinema. And I'm reminded that often in our history, the greatest storytellers are the ones who have been through immense experiences. Often, more often than not, great suffering. There's something about suffering that really humbles us. Suffering can lead to such an extent that we've got no other option than to turn to divine intervention, to let go of our pride in ourselves, and to put our trust in something bigger than ourselves. Now, of course, in George's case, and no doubt in many other people's cases, God will often use divine intervention in such a manner that we don't expect, but we need. Which is rather thematically appropriate because George is wanting more, but what he needs is to be grateful for what he has. It's a common pattern I've noticed. People want one thing, but then we actually need something else. I think of the Seventh Seal, the character Antonius Block. He wants certainty, but what he needs is to trust despite the uncertainty. And often, there's something about suffering that can really sharpen and strengthen our characters, like molding silver in a furnace. It's rather profound that way. Think about it. Think of times when you grew as a person. Think of times when you started to actually grow as a person. The majority of the time, if not all the time, you grew to be a better person because you suffered. Now, of course, people can be taught manners and other things like that in the class, but something about big transformations for the better. Suffering has a way of bringing that out. And I think the movie It's a Wonderful Life does a brilliant job in portraying that. What can I say that hasn't already been said about the movie? It's brilliantly paced, and it's quite fascinating how most of the movie is basically an elaborate introduction to the character before we get involved into where he is at the present moment. Because the actual story is this character being in such despair that he wishes he was never born, gets taken to the alternative timeline in which he was never born, then suddenly sees the horror of that, wants to live again, and so he's grateful for what he has, and so he lives happily through it all. And something else that's worth noting is that, yes, there is a happily ever after, but notice how George became happy even in the midst of the terrible situation he was in. I think the movie's brilliantly paced that way, because I think to have him have the reward from all the people immediately after he got back, that would cheapen the message. I think it strengthens the message that he decides, I am joyful and grateful even in the midst of a terrible situation. If he has that mindset first, that is a form of humility, and then he gets blessed 10 times over. It's like the book of Job in that way. A man who has enough to get by for his day and age, but then loses it all and suffers terribly. But even in the midst of that, is grateful to the Lord for a good relationship. And in fact, it's implied that he was prideful in some way, but eventually was humbled. And because of that, he then got blessed with 10 times as much. Films like It's a Wonderful Life and the stories like The Grinch are necessary in today's culture. In fact, I think there's kind of a ironic blessing in having The Grinch be emphasized in Christmas merchandising these days, because those kind of stories remind us that Christmas is hollow if it's fixated purely on the consumerist kind of stuff. Because it reminds us that if Christmas is just all about consumerism and materialism, then it's going to be hollow. If we actually emphasize the family, as well as the hopeful foundations that made Christmas what it is in the first place, then we'll have truly enriching lifestyles. I tell you, It's a Wonderful Life. It really has aged like a fine red wine. It talks about the human condition and wanting more and more, but more is never enough. And the beauty of being grateful for what you have. It's a timeless message. Absolute cinema. So I give It's a Wonderful Life a 12 out of 12. It's one of the best movies ever made and one of the top Christmas movies ever made. What do you think of It's a Wonderful Life, and how has it influenced your life? Let me know in the comments down below, and if there's anything meaningful you want to bring up in the comments, please do so. I'd be very willing to have these kind of conversations. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year when it comes around. In the meantime, ScotsThinker signing out.